the engine is learning, let's say, in Italian, benefits Spanish detection or Portuguese detection. Some languages are too remote to benefit. So, the engine would not benefit from learning Lithuanian for French.
They said the cost and technological complications of introducing blockchain technology into our process outweigh the benefits.
When we downloaded it, we saw that it was actually machine translated. There was a small disclaimer that said this document was prepared using our machine translation. Hello to SlatorPod 43, your favorite language industry podcast. I'm back in Zurich.
And I'm in London.
Great. Today we have a guest, Manuel Herranz, CEO of Pangeanic, Spanish-based LSP/MT company. Really looking forward to talking to Manuel. They just launched a new MT product, but he's going to tell us a lot more about this. And I think it's around the e-Translate initiative, the European Union's e-Translate initiative. So how is lockjobs.com doing, Esther?
Really good.
It is doing
I think
really
I checked. Well. We're always looking for an update on the numbers of job postings, but I think when I looked the other day, it was 45, 47. So
we're way past this.
Oh, we're past that. Okay.
We're way past. I think we're at 70 now.
Oh, that has gone up.
Yeah, we're at 70. No, 61. Yeah,
61.
So
got some new takers.
New takers, lots of traffic on the website. We already have over 150 or 60 resumes and profiles on the site. So it's actually getting very, very useful also for employers to go in. So
quite a lot of active candidates.
Yeah, a lot of activity there, and it works like a charm. Also a lot of traction on LinkedIn. I put out a LinkedIn post, and a lot of people liked it. So thanks so much for that. I think like a third of the traffic to the site, lockjobs.com, came from LinkedIn yesterday or something after that post. So it was quite good. So very pleased about that. Today, we shall be talking about quick update on the mega merger, RWS-SDL, then Rosetta, a Japanese machine translation company that provided some update on how they're doing right now. You're going to tell us a bit more about the Slovenian startup TAIA, and then we're going to dig into some of the UK-based LSPs. They all had to file some of their results, and we're going to look at how they did last year, but more importantly, how it's going with the pandemic. So there were some updates in there, correct? This was not just...
Yeah, there were some updates, and I mean, I don't think all of them had disclosed sort of publicly prior to filing what the 2019 results were. So some new information, albeit slightly, behind.
Yeah, but looking forward, I like what they had to say about COVID. I mean, COVID's getting the second wave it's not cresting, but it's like it's building up. We're having more cases than ever here in Switzerland. I think it's like twice the peak in March. Oh wow! So it is, but it feels somewhat different. Because
like
there's
better
very few
prepared, or
there's fewer people going to the hospital. That's the very, very good news. A lot fewer people dying. So I mean, I hope it doesn't go up further. I mean, but the good news is seems so far somewhat under control. But let's not talk too much about COVID, although right now I did actually, the interesting thing is I did have a few plans around in-person events maybe towards the end of the year, smaller events. I mean, we didn't really plan too much yet, but we were thinking about it, and now with what's going on, it's like you probably put it on the back burner again for more spring 2021. So
So we do have remote. We have another SlatorCon remote.
Good one. We have another SlatorCon remote.
Had you forgotten?
I have not forgotten. No, yes, but it's there's a lot of things going on. So yes, we're in early December. Also open for registration. Fantastic program. We have Benjamin from Accolade, the CEO. Continental Europe's largest LSP. So So he's going to be doing a keynote, and then there's a lot more that we're going to be announcing. So go and get your ticket. It's also on a fantastic new platform. So we're moving away from good old gold webinar and going to something a little more interactive. So I'm looking forward to trialing that. Actually, we're going to trial that out with an India webinar we're going to be running in a couple of weeks. So looking forward to checking out that platform. It's called Hopin. It's from the people who did the Web Summit. So they know how to manage events. Web Summit, 70,000 people, Portugal. So
I see.
So basically, they're white labeling their backend now for virtual.
So
conferencing.
that's not the Swiss company you were talking about last week or whatever it was. Different one.
No, different one.
Been trying them all out.
Yeah, that's why people dial into this podcast to listen my take on remote conferencing. All right, let's go back.
It's practical tips for life, these days.
You're good one. Let's go to core competency, which is language industry, and RWS-SDL, the biggest now in the world. Once they've merged, roughly $1 billion in revenue. So, a bit more than twice the size of the combined Oculot and Plexor. And profits of like 100 million pounds, north of 100 million pounds eventually. So what happened there on October 9th, both shareholders of SDL and RWS approved the deal. Then there's some technicalities left, like a court hearing, apparently. And then that needs to go through, which then marks like the day one for all of the next steps. Like they have a fixed plan of, okay, once the court hearings is over, then we're going to move to all these other steps. One of them, the first one, is to delist SDL from the stock market, right? Oh. No longer trading. And we did dig a little further into the mechanism. And I'm going to spare people my attempt at analyzing a complex corporate transaction. But basically, what people need to look out for is the share ratio, right? So SDL shareholders will get 1.2 new RWS shares for each SDL share they own. So they're swapping shares. There's no cash being exchanged, right? Basically, RWS is using their shares as a currency to buy. So it's hard at the moment to actually put a deal value out there. So you can't really say the deal values SDL at X, because it really depends at what price those shares will be exchanged for. So SDL shareholders really have an incentive obviously they have an incentive, but they have a strong interest that RWS shares keep going up. Right? Or go up. They dipped a bit post announcement. Now they're climbing up again. So they're hoping, SDL shareholders, that at the end, once that day comes when the price will be fixed and the shares will change hands, that they actually the RWS shares are as high as possible, because then the price for SDL will be higher and higher. At the end result will be the SDL shareholders immediately post that switch will own roughly 30%. And RWS shareholders will own roughly 70% of the combined company. So if you want to know the details, go check out the article. If you want to really know the details, go and check that document again. It's like a 100-pager that they put out, a couple of weeks, or like at the announcement. So it's somewhat complex to go through. It was a little hard for us to get through this immediately post-announcement. So now we dug a little deeper. And a reminder to everybody, if you want to be up to date about all of those listed language service providers, head over to our real-time performance tracker for our pro subscribers. You can, we have a ticker, and you can see all of the prices there as those companies perform. It's very nice. So moving on to another publicly listed company, but actually kind of a special one. It's called Rosetta with a Z. Based in Japan, and they just published their 6-month results. So they generated about $19 million those are half-year results. Right?
This is first half results for 2021. Okay. Yeah. They have like a different reporting calendar. I think they go to the end of February or something.
And
maybe right?
End of March, end of February. Anyway, so they're listed in Tokyo Stock Exchange, and so $19 million. Roughly, they're projecting around $37 million for the full year. So the much more interesting though is, how did we get these figures? We got these figures through a filing which was in English, and only upon looking at it a little more closely when we downloaded it, we saw that it was actually machine translated. There was a small disclaimer that said this document was prepared using our machine translation, because it's a machine translation company, and no manual modification has been made to the translated contents. This document is to be solely used as reference, blah, 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 blah. It goes on to like just check some of the, I guess, legal boxes. But to me, I think that's the first time I've seen this. I've never seen this.
Yeah, I don't think I have.
A public company using MT without a single edit, that's as a regulatory filing. I don't know. That seems, we've said bold a couple of times in this podcast, but that seems bold to me. And to be honest, you're reading it, and yes, it's good, but yeah, there is a couple of, well, it's machine translation. So, and my Japanese is non-existent. So I don't know. Maybe there's some mistakes, but I guess they got the figures right. At least we hope so. So yeah. At least in a sense, they eat their own dog food, right? They rely on their own machine translation to translate that. I was actually surprised when I saw it for the first time that it was in English without really realizing that it was MT. So that they would go. Okay, yeah, we just had a bit of a hiccup there with the podcasting software. So another interesting fact is that they're valued at $322 million on the stock market. That's 20 times revenue. That's a very nutty software as a service like valuation. 322 million for a company that's doing so it's 10 times
37.
Revenue. Yeah, like that's a lot. I mean, they barely have a profit. So in terms of MT, actually, most of their business is MT, right? It's roughly 25 million a year or something is MT. So interesting. And they're also saying that it's impossible to predict the fully fledged recovery period related to the COVID-19 pandemic and the downturn in purchasing activities of client companies, which are deeply related to the overseas economies. Now, what I just read was actually machine translation from the Japanese. Interesting. Anyway, they launched a few more products, etc. We don't have to go into this, but finally, it's an interesting business because most of their business is MT, but they still hold on to like $4 or $5 million or $10 million in human translation, and they have a crowdsourcing business. So interesting business. Seems the valuation seems extremely stretched at like 10 times revenue. I wonder where this is going to go. I mean, they would have to, just become a giant to justify that valuation. But we've seen this before with other companies like Appen, etc. Right? So let's see where this is heading. Coming back to Europe, Slovenia. What's happened there with a new startup?
Yeah. So startup TAIA told us that they raised 1.2 million euros in funding, I think really recently. So that was a Series A funding round from Phil Rouge Capital, which is a Croatia-based investment firm. So it's about $1.4 million that they've raised there. So I mean, interesting. We spoke to them about the investment, a little bit more about the company. So I think they were founded technically in 2017, and then had the minimum viable product, or sort of actually launched more like late 2018. It's not their first round of investment either. So they actually went through, I think, an accelerator program. That saw the accelerator program take some shares in the company, which they later bought back from the accelerator. And they also raised a seed money, I think last year, of 200,000 euros. So yeah, the founders, both of them, I mean, it's an interesting sort of origin story for TAIA. They said that they had a language teaching school. So they had a teaching school in Slovenia, started to grow, and then they started to receive some translation requests via the language school. And I think they were receiving more and more translation requests and sort of thought, okay, this could actually be a business. But they wanted to, I think, set out and change, take a slightly more automated approach than maybe what they had seen previously. So TAIA has a pretty strong focus on automation, and they do the whole AI-enabled human translation services. Customers can sign up for an account to sort of log in and order via the platform. And they offer, I think they've got like a machine translation service that's currently in beta. So they're going to be developing the product more with the money. So they're going to spend that obviously partly on product and partly on growth.
Interesting company. What about what I remember from them was blockchain.
Oh yeah. Well, I think
there was some,
they've kind of abandoned that now, but I think they were kind of looking into blockchain and integrating blockchain into sort of translation operations, or launching their own coin, I think, even sort of a couple of years ago. But yeah, they basically said that after some sort of research and exploration, they said the cost and technological complications of introducing blockchain technology into our process outweigh the benefits. That was their latest take on it.
I mean, I've been fairly, I mean, I like the crypto scene, but I think in translation, it's like a solution looking for a problem. I don't really see that. I mean, maybe there's two angles, I guess. One would be like ownership of linguistic assets, but do you really need a blockchain for that? And then the other one would be micropayments. Again, like seems solved with companies
kind
like
of a solved
SmartCat.
problem.
Yeah, SmartCat, definitely they're a leader. So I don't know. We did mention the valuation, right?
Yeah, so it was a pre-money valuation of 6 million euros. And they also gave us their, not bad. And they also gave us their revenues, which were 3 million euros in 2019. So I guess that's what the valuation would be based on. Plus they're forecasting revenues of 0.7 million euros in 2020. Did I get that the right way around? 0.3 million in 2019 and 0.7 forecast for 2020. Yeah.
And the valuation is based on amazing growth in the future. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
6 million seems quite a lot, but good for them. It's a good round to start. It seems very switched on. So good luck to them. Now, moving to more conventional businesses, or at least less or larger, yet somewhat more conventional business, going over to the
more
UK.
Established. Yeah,
more established, where they have to file some of their filings. So we had the Big Word, Capita TI, Translate Plus. Actually, Capita TI and Translate Plus are both, they're both part of bigger organizations. The Big Word is a standalone. But they published results for 2019. So what we really wanted to look is is there any update on what's going on this year, right? So maybe just tell us some of the highlights about what their take is on current business and, of course, how they did last year.
Yeah, so I suppose start with the Big Word, the biggest of the three. So they actually just shared the financial results for the 7 months to the end of December, because they've actually switched their reporting calendar now. So a bit complicated, but they generated, I think, £51 million in the 7 months to December 31. So, I mean, I think they are talking about what's happening over the next 12 months. And I think one interesting fact was to do with the machine translation use and the impact that they think that is going to have on the business. So they were saying that they are expecting a decline in revenues over the next 12 months and this is a quote, "We expect our machine translation solutions to cannibalize some of our revenue, and this will lead to an overall reduction in revenue." But then they go on to say, however, machine translation is higher in margin, and we expect to deliver a significant increase in profit. So I think they are forecasting a decline in revenues for 2020, at least in part because of machine translation, but they see themselves as setting themselves up for, both EBITDA growth and also revenue growth for probably starting up again in 2021. For COVID, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead with COVID first. Yeah. Oh no, I mean, COVID is just like a short update. They just said the group has continued to operate profitably, and probably, I didn't take too much from the COVID, but they were the normal sort of, don't know exactly what's going to be happening, but we think the business is going to, continue on a stable level. I think it's interesting that they mention MT to cannibalize some of our revenue. I've never heard it put that way in like an official document so far. I mean, so, it's an interesting angle that they would basically attribute a decline on more MTUs. So the question would be more MTUs by whom? By them? Or so they're becoming more efficient, thereby lowering price, thereby retaining profitability, but hitting their
top line, i.e. the revenue? Or are there clients using it more and they're selling the tech? We should probably have somebody on the podcast at some point.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting angle. I've never really seen that. And you can sense they're a private company. That's something I guess a public company would have a bit of an issue putting in an official filing, cannibalizing revenue. So Capita TI, part of the bigger group, the huge Capita outsourcing group. There was a story recently that they were being sold, or like that part of the group was being sold.
Yeah, so this was back in February. I think we've reported on it. We were covering some news that had been put out in the UK media. So Capita PLC, the large group I think generates somewhere in the region of $5 billion a year. So really huge. They have a lot of different business lines, or it's organized sort of in quite a complex manner, but they have one division called Specialist Services, and this is where Capita Translation and Interpreting sits. So these specialist services are kind of the non-core businesses of Capita PLC. The story is that they wanted to sell off Specialist Services. So that's a group of nine businesses, including the translation and interpreting piece. And they were hoping to sell it off for at least £200 million and ideally to one bidder. So that was as of February.
So it's going to be hard for anybody to buy Capita alone. Yeah, I remember we spoke
Seems
about
like
it.
I mean, maybe as time
goes,
TI, yeah. I suppose maybe as time goes on, they might be more open to different options. But definitely, their preference at the time was to sell all of it as a lump. I can't really remember what the other businesses are, but I think it's a mix. Is it not something that necessarily somebody operating like an LSP would be inclined to take over? I don't think.
And then on the results side, 16 million pounds, more or less flat operating profit, down to like 800,000 pounds. In terms of COVID, they said they faced some challenges and uncertainty due to COVID, but expects revenue to remain resilient given the diverse client base. Seems like something we've heard from many others as well. Like, yes, it's not great, but generally resilient, diverse client base, especially from the bigger ones.
I mean, these guys haven't made any real progress since they gave up the Ministry of Justice contract either. So when they exited that contract, I think before they exited, they were on about 30-something million pounds a year, and they're now down to kind of half that, or just above half that.
Yeah, but that was terrible revenue because they probably didn't make money off of it.
But what I mean is like since 2017 was the first full year, I think, that they reported without having the Ministry of Justice contract, and that's now sort of like three full calendar years, 3 full financial years. Yeah, it's more or less flat since then. But
yeah, they're not alone though. There's still a few others in that area that are flat. Translate Plus, just briefly before we wrap.
Yes, Translate Plus. So again, part of a larger group. It used to be a standalone LSP, but it was acquired by Prodigious, which is a cross-media production platform. Prodigious itself is owned by Publicis Group, which I think is the third largest advertising agency in the world. So Translate Plus does report as a standalone entity, although seemingly there are way more translation localization revenues within the wider group. But anyway, Translate Plus, they reported revenues of £11 million in 2019, which is around a 9% drop from 2018. Interestingly, I thought was that actually the only declines came from Europe, which is their biggest sort of client base geographically. No other geographies reported a decrease. But yeah, operating profit also down to about £2.2 million. It's
quite a lot.
It's quite a lot. Yeah.
It's quite profitable.
And then on COVID-19, they've said, we are confident that the impact on our trading activities is manageable. And they've said, yes, it is difficult to reasonably estimate how advertising and marketing spend and budgets are going to be evolving throughout 2020. But they are still managing to secure some new clients despite the current circumstances.
Good for them. Because you cannot have many client meetings. So it's interesting to close. Like I wonder, like, to close, I mean, we spoke about it in the sales and marketing conversation many times, but like, how do you close a deal if you can't meet the client? Like for me, from my experience, it's always like at least the final stage would be a meeting. right? A personal meeting. So it's like,
So
hey,
shake the person's hand and buy them
it's
lunch
just
or
kind
something.
of establish some type of rapport. Like if you close a big $500,000 whatever deal, like over Zoom, I don't know, it's like, okay, bye.
Bit
It's
of an
like,
anticlimax, maybe.
Yeah, it really is. All right, so good for them that they were able to close. Let's talk to Manuel Herranz and ask him how he's doing sales and marketing, and also, of course, I want to know about their MT initiative. So let's check back in a couple of seconds. And we're back. We're back with Manuel Herranz, CEO from Pangeanic. Hi, Manuel.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Florian. Hi, Esther.
Hello.
Hey, Manuel. Where does this podcast find you today?
Very well, very well. Thank you. In a very sunny day in Valencia. Although strangely it was raining yesterday, but very positive, very, very good here.
Wow, you guys still have some decent weather down there, I suppose.
We still do,
yeah, as opposed to here, where it's the fall has set in full swing. So, well, thanks so much for joining us here on SlatorPod. Really excited to talk to you today. So, to get it started, maybe just tell us a bit more about your background, how you got started in the language industry, how you started your company, and some of the key developments along the way.
Sure. So I began, my coming into the language industry was a bit of a coincidence. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade and qualifications, and I was spending happy days working for Ford and suppliers in the UK back in the 90s, and then Rolls-Royce in power generation. And obviously, being Spanish, a lot of non-English material used to come my way, and I was responsible for training Spanish-speaking people. And that kind of, after I finished my contract with Ford and Rolls, kind of sends me on the way of setting up my own consultancy firm. I then joined a Japanese company called BI Corporation until that was 97 probably, until 2005 when I got the European arm out, and then Pangeanic was born.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's so interesting. We're having a fair amount of founders now on the podcast, and so many come from like a different angle, right? I mean, Sandeep is also from, I think it was also car manufacturing, right? So like there were Sandeep, who we had on last week, and then there's a problem with language, and then it slowly kind of like, that tweaks the interest. So, okay, so Pangeanic was born. Tell us a bit more about just the background. How was it born? Did you set it up yourself? What was the original HQ, I guess, in Valencia? What were some of like the early clients, etc. you got on?
Yeah, although, so even though Pangeanic is based in Valencia, and that's where it was established, it was the European arm of a Japanese corporation for 7 years. So our DNA was pretty much Japanese. It was, and our main clients were Japanese, the Sonys, the Panasonics, and so forth. And our main market was Japan. We were making use of time difference to complete Japanese jobs in European time. And that went on for a number of years until 2007-8, we began collaborating with Polytechnic here in Valencia. It's a very renowned institution for pattern detection and human language research at the time into human language technologies, which were all statistical. Statistics were pretty high for them, and the world of machine translation came our way.
Very interesting. Yeah. Okay. So now I understand the Japanese arm side, and then it was eventually you spun it off from it in 2007 or 8. Was that like a buyout, and then you established it as a separate company, or?
Yeah, the buyout happened in 2005.
Yeah.
Since then, we were completely a separate entity, financially independent, although we keep very good relationship with our old HQ in Japan, and it has gone down. We've internationalized quite a lot, and we serve a lot more markets, but Japan as a region is quite important for us. Yes, it's probably it's less than a quarter of our revenue. At one point was over 80%, but it's not usual for a European, let alone Spanish language company to have a Japanese connection.
Do you speak Japanese?
No, I spent a lot of time. I spent quite a few. I've been to Japan many times, 35 times. So I lived there for a while, but no longer than 1-2 months.
Yeah.
So
it's really tough. I know. I did some business in Japan. I was based in China, and then I had to go there from time to time. It's a tricky market. It's a very I like it as a market, but it's something you need to be on site for personally and really deep into it. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about your current clients. Like, what type of verticals do you service? What type of key clients do you have? Both on the, I think you have a language services business, but also the technology business. Can you just tell us a bit more about the client base, services base?
Sure. Yeah. So the company is split into divisions, what we call the human services area and the technology area. The human services is what we would understand as a typical LSP, and that includes human translation, the traditional human translation services, with or without post-editing. And that works pretty well. The technological division sometimes feeds from it. Both work together on many occasions. And that develops natural language processing tools, improves our machine translation, and then develops other tools like anonymization, summarization, cataloging, categorization. And that's how the company splits. Main clients range from banks, financial institutions. We're pretty good with that here in Spain. Medical devices in the United States, and of late, particularly the last year and a half, selling data to train AI.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, Esther, sorry, I think you had a question. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So no, I suppose a business question, really. In terms of sales and marketing activities, I suppose more for the LSP business. What are you doing right now to try and drive sales, and what do you think people should be doing? I suppose specifically as a result of the pandemic, but more generally too.
That question is a challenge. Obviously, with travel restrictions, all our sales personnel are downed. They're grounded. They can't fly. Local clients can see you, but most of the time they don't want to see you, and everything has changed. This has a good and a bad side to it. The bad side, obviously, is that you're grounded. You're on the ground. You have to pick the phone, and people will answer or not answer. So all sales and marketing efforts are digital. And now I come to the good side. That levels the field to even medium size and smaller and much smaller LSPs than Pangeanic, because the large buyers are putting out RFPs, and you are judged by the material you produce. So you could be a five people venture, I don't know, in the middle of France or Germany, but your RFP might be as good as one of the, or as attractive for this type of work than a proposal coming from the big 5 or 6. So there is that side. The bad thing is that you obviously can't go to trade exhibitions, fairs, have your networking, your one-to-one. The good side is that the level field has changed completely. Is now a lot more level.
Interesting. I've never thought about it that way. Yeah.
That's true. And I suppose sticking with COVID as well, what other impacts have you seen on, both on your business and also on the industry, other than travel and sales?
Yeah. Well, for us, being platform-based, it didn't affect us much. We moved operations home one day before lockdown here in Spain. Spain was the second country in Europe. And we could see was coming, looking at Italy, and starting an audit on the company to move everybody home, or as many people as we could home. And we moved. We began moving home on Thursday. The lockdown happened on a Saturday. So come Monday, operation was almost almost as normal, apart from a few people. We are 40 people, so it wasn't that difficult. Then it was a challenge operation-wise. Anything that had to do with the cloud and the platform was running just the same. So that was good. We use XDRF as management software. Okay, so that was running on the cloud. No people were delivering. The problem, let's say problems, may have been not being able to conduct the interviews on site, personnel interviews or reviews that people are used to. As for business, this has been our best year ever. I don't know whether that's related to COVID or not. Certainly what we have been selling has not been affected by COVID. We've been feeding a lot of work to AI industry. It's exactly data. The human services side, yes, has been affected. Work stopped for quite a few weeks. Not anything that had to do with medical. That was even pumped up a lot more, working around the clock. But tourism, which is obviously an area being in Spain that we serve a lot, that's died a death. So altogether, has been quite. The areas that have cancelled, like tourism, have been supported by other areas that have grown quite a lot, like healthcare, and specifically AI. Anything having to do with AI and data has grown a lot.
So would you consider the data and the AI business as part of your like MT business, or like straight up MTs, like a separate unit? Can you just walk us a bit more through the tech offering? You did it before, but just a little in depth.
Yeah. Data to feed machine translation or natural language processing cannot come from machine translation. It has to be human. Because what you try to do is feed data, human systems with human data. If you machine translate it and then post edit it, you may run the risk of adding bias to it, because machines are going to translate in a certain way, and without even noticing, post editors may translate in a certain way. So anything that has to do with data is human.
And from a business point, from like your business structure point of view, is like, do you have like one technology unit that would do the data annotation, the machine translation offering in one, and then like the services side is a separate side, or they kind of all work together very closely, or how is that structured?
They are separate business units, but they do hire each other. Okay. So services hires machine translation from the tech division, and then the tech division uses annotators and translators for that. Yeah.
Can I just want to? Oh, go ahead. I'm interrupting.
Sorry, just one brief question there. We had Andrew Bradenkamp from Acrolinks at one of our SlatorCon conference, and he was like, well, enjoy the data annotation ride as long as it lasts, but it's going to be over at some point. Like, because essentially those big tech companies, what they're trying to do is to get rid of all the human annotation and just go fully algorithmic. So is that something you're seeing as well? Or do you think like the data annotation business is something that's here to stay?
I agree with Andrew. It's gonna. It has a run, and the run will run for quite a few years. It's not gonna die next year. In fact, it's probably going to increase. Data annotation market was $1 billion last year, and it's expected to grow to 12 billion in the next 5 to 6 years. So there is a lot of room there. Now, however, do I see the time when algorithms and machines are so good that they need very little annotation? Yes, that's true. In fact, what I do see in the AI field, and AI applied to language, is that in the next 10 years, costs of any kind, not precisely our industry, the language industry, costs are going to be reduced in a magnitude of 10. Whatever costs 10 is going to cost 1 in 2030. But efficiency is going to increase in an order of magnitude over 10%. If you produce 10, you'll be able to produce 100 or over 100 because of technology. So that change it's very COVID-like. It's going to disrupt everything, and we're living through those times. Yeah, I'm probably will be too old for that, but I'm excited of what's going to happen in the next 10 years. Now, annotation is one of the trends. Annotation, yes, will last a few years. It will not be so necessary. Maybe in 5, maybe in 10 years. No, it will not be so necessary. True.
Okay. Yeah. Esther, you had a question before. Maybe I
No, I think it was actually quite similar to yours.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to know a bit more about data annotation and everything. But I did have a structural question as well. So I understand you've got Pangeanic as the LSP, and then there's Pangaea MT. Is that
yeah.
That's a separate sort of entity from?
It became a separate company this year.
But the AI piece is still within Pangeanic.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Pangeanic is the licensee and the brand, the deployer, if you wish.
And so we have this service called Slator Sweep, where we kind of send an email every day to people about stuff that we don't cover on the website. And we picked up on one of your announcements, I think it was yesterday or today, around multilingual I can't even pronounce anonymization project.
MAPA. Let's call it MAPA.
MAPA. Yeah, it's a mouthful. Yes, it's a project that we proposed to the European Commission. I think it was last year, and it was approved this year. It's the first time, but there have been anonymization softwares and solutions for a while, but they tended to be monolingual. So you got German, okay, and you run a dictionary and the most popular German names, and you got rid of the names, or you used pseudo anonymization, and you change all the Wolfhams by Tonys and so forth. With the advent of neural networks and deep natural language processing, what you can do is identify actors in the text. So you pick up credit cards, but no telephone numbers, because you've used annotation, because you can you know what is a credit card or what a credit card number looks like in comparison to a telephone number, for example, a social security number or a driving license. So we proposed this to the Commission, and it was accepted on the grounds that it was going to be truly multilingual. It was going to cover all the languages of the EU. So it would be deployable as a Docker and open source at any public administration. And that is what we are building now. What I spoke about yesterday at eTranslation was the pre-beta, the pre-release of the software. And it's looking pretty good, because using name entity recognition techniques, we benefit from one language to another. So what the engine is learning, let's say in Italian, benefits Spanish detection or Portuguese detection. Some languages are too remote to benefit. So, the engine would not benefit from learning Lithuanian for French, but it does benefit from learning Estonian for Finnish detection. So do expect some results in spring 2021. So
walk us through a couple of use cases of that once it's like out of the very early stages and deployed.
Oh, well, one will be in Switzerland, actually.
And we're not even part of the European Union. Yes, go on. What does the European Union pay and we can use?
Well, this is going to be open source, so it'll be a Docker that will be freely available to users. I introduced MAPA at Covens. This is a conference organized by the University of Zurich. That was in June, I think. A use case can be on a high court, when people, you've been a bad boy or a bad girl not paying your taxes, and you've been, all that data has to be anonymized. Typically, it's pseudo-anonymized, so you use different names. So court rulings that are published on the web will be one of the first cases. Certainly, a candidate number one. That is what we're building. A second candidate is medical data that needs to be shared across administrations.
Good. Okay. Yeah, we shall look into it. I think e-translation, that conference was yesterday, right? I saw a YouTube video, 5 hours. Should go through it.
Yeah.
So you're obviously very much into a lot of what's happening, both with what you've described with named entity and machine translation. What do you think are the most exciting trends and developments within machine translation specifically today?
Specifically in machine translation, well, machine translation has, I don't want to call it commodity, but has become part of everyday conversation of any reputable LSP. Whereas 10 years ago, when we started with statistical machine translation, it was like, well, guys, this is, you think you can, no. Specifically in machine translation, obviously the biggest break has been the possibility to use neural networks, and having the off-the-shelf engines perform so well. That's true. Any good NLP person, PhD doctor coming from university will train you the engines, and the performance will be pretty good. What is exciting about the latest developments, or where the next frontiers are, is on paragraph translation and making sure that the links in the sentence, going beyond sentence translation. So, in English, the typical English translation mistakes, his car, her car, he picked up her wallet. Well, it wasn't her, it was his wallet. That affects so many languages. That is more noticeable in some languages than others. So paragraph translation is going to be one, and the repercussions that having such good machine translation has on the job of a translator, and the job of project managers becoming machine translation managers as well. Okay, that's something that it was discussed in the latest AMTA meeting last week.
Did you join that one, or?
I was, I kind of, no, I didn't attend the full 5 hours like yesterday. Yeah. I did what I attended a couple of sessions, the ones I could. Yeah. But that struck me, and it is something that I've been hearing for quite a while, that MT is going to be another tool that project managers are going to use, just like you use translation memories. So they will be able to train, retrain, and you're a client, you're a new client. Well, I have this kind of engines, and I can customize those engines this afternoon for you, so they can mimic your hotel terminology, or your pharma terminology, or your international litigation case terminology.
What's your take on like big tech's efforts in MT? The Googles, the Amazons, the Microsofts. I mean, they've been at this for 10, 20 years now, and I mean, Amazon less so, of course. But how do you see them? Like, are they? Do you think it's a major priority for them? Do you see them as a key competitor? Do you think, well, they're never going to be able to customize it to the degree that we can? How do you see their role?
Well, they're very good. Competition's good. In fact, one of the best things that has happened to machine translation companies is the fact that Google translates Open the Field so much. And the proof of the pudding is then we had Bing translator, and now we have Amazon as well. Amazon is different because it offers a little bit like us, not just machine translation, but a wide variety of NLP services. So they are different in a way. Customization is always going to be lacking for the big guys. They offer a very good service, very cheap. It can be everywhere, but it is the difference of buying a car, a typical car that we can buy, or buying a Ferrari, or buying something that is built for you, and it's going to take. Perhaps it's not the best comparison, but or going to a tailor. And
you're building the Ferrari, I take it.
I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to say that, but yeah. Well, is it interesting enough? We also part of another project for the European Union. We're building the largest network of one-to-one engines. So it means not pivoting through English. So it's German into Danish, German into Swedish, German into Greek, and so forth. Together with Kantan, MT, and Tilde. And what we find is that for the specific domain area of public administration talk, all of us are beating Google like 5-1 or 10-1. So the big guys tend to be very wide. Okay, and a company like ours will never run that marathon. We cannot run miles and miles long, but they're 2 inches deep. So if the race is long, they'll beat us. But if we're talking about going deep, it's very easy for us to beat the Googles and the Bings and the Amazons.
Yeah, that's what Adam Bittlingmeyer told us in one of our first guest podcasts. He was also, it's a bit of the little dirty secret of the MT industry that most go through the pivot, that very few go direct, right? So, because otherwise, yeah, you couldn't do those 900 language combos, or probably if you took all the Google language combos together, it's probably 10,000 or something. It would be it would be hard to go direct for all of those. Hey, and I want your take on like how linguists interact, translators interact with machine translation. Is post-editing machine translation really the end state here? Because as a former translator, I just can't imagine this being a long-term thing, just basically getting output from NT and like kind of fixing it. If it has its place, of course, but I hope there's a more creative approach going forward to interact with tech. What's your take on that?
I think here the key is the interactive side of it and the gamification side of it. So if you make it fun, people will do it. If you make it horrible and boring, like post-editing used to be, it was passive. I send you an email with something that has been badly machine translated. It was rule-based or statistical, and you spend more time correcting silly machine mistakes than that obviously wasn't very sexy. If you make it interactive and the professional can see that the machine is improving step by step, maybe not on the fly, but is improving by the end of the day, by tomorrow, that's fun, and that has certainly a future. In fact, is one of our most popular offerings, the fact that when you finish your workday, you press a button and your engine, which has nothing to do with Esther's engines or my engines, is improved in an aggressive mode to what you've done today. Okay, and if what you did today is a one-off and you don't want to build on that, you create a spin-off engine and you specialize that engine for today for that client, and then tomorrow you follow with something else. So if you make it this way, if you make it so fun like this, people will take up post-editing.
Okay.
It's interesting. It reminds me a bit of Facebook, where I don't know if they still do it, but where they were asking people to kind of correct translations on the platform. So when you're talking about the gamification, I suppose it's that sort of element of trying to feel like you're contributing. But of course, that's quite different from paid work.
Yes, it's a very good example, Esther. Very good example. But you own the engines. So you would have 6 Esther engines specialized in whatever field. And if one of them is not performing very well, or you can spin one off and create a child from that engine and say, well, today I'm going to translate with a child because this is a new client and I don't want to mix the style of terminology. So there are ways of making machine translation fun for people and for companies.
And then bringing it, I suppose, a bit closer to home then, what are your priorities for the business for 2020 and for next year as well?
Well, 2020, we'll have to finish this year. It has been
get through it.
For business.
Yeah, quick.
Yeah, I keep thinking about what's going to happen in Christmas Day and Christmas. An earthquake or something is really going to add not for business, but obviously for the world in general, it's been pretty horrific. So let's dust 2020. For 2021, we have some very exciting announcements and previews that I'll speak more about, not on this podcast, but they have to do with gamification of machine translation and gamification of anonymization.
Very interesting.
We'll stay tuned. Yeah. Gamification, I haven't heard that before. So in terms of that, again, in a professional services, language services context. So I'll look forward to some of those announcements. Well, that brings us to a close. It was really great having you on. Hope stay safe in Valencia, wherever we are. This has been a European podcast. We're bringing it back home a little bit more to Europe. And as I tell everybody before we close, I really hope to see you in IRL, in real life, soon, but it's probably going to be 2021.
Yes, it looks like. Yeah, I think that the next Slator meeting is virtual, obviously.
Yeah, we got one we got the SlatorCon remote in December. It's going to be on a different platform, so it's going to be more interactive. But I do want to go back to these conferences. And initially, I thought I wasn't going to miss them, but I do. So
yeah, and the networking is always good.
It is very All right, Manuel, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you, Florian. Thank you.